Well, I want to make sure that you are marking your calendars on this Tuesday morning. Welcome in. Hope your day's off to a great start. Thanks for making KCMO Talk Radio part of it. 1 week from tonight, there's going to be a town hall on the Jackson County sports teams. That, of course, being the Chiefs and the Royals. It's taking place Tuesday, December 12th at 1020 West 103rd Street, and it's being put on by Manny Abarca, who is a county legislator who has been at odds with Frank White, the county executive, over the last, really several months over the future of these two teams, the ballparks, and where the future should be for the Royals and the Chiefs. So I'll retweet this link because you have to RSVP. I've got nothing to do with it. I'm not going to be there. But if you want to go, it's next Tuesday night. And Manny's going to join the show at 9 o'clock this morning. I bring this up to start the show here because this is a political story. This is not a sports story. Anyone telling you this is a sports story doesn't understand what the story is really about. This story is about taxes, this story is about backroom deals, and this story is about politicians who cannot get out of each other's way. Over the last week or so, you've seen a movement and you've seen a loud push from various media folks suggesting that if the Royals and the Chiefs don't get the deal they want in Jackson County, they're going to Kansas. I think it's a bluff. I don't buy it for a second. I don't think they want to go there. I think there are elements of each maybe ownership group that would be interested, but I firmly believe at this point in time it is a bluff. They are fed up with Jackson County. And by the way, they have every right to be fed up with Jackson County. I don't blame them one bit for that. The incompetency, regardless of what you think about new stadiums and publicly financing sports stadiums, however you feel about that, leave that aside. Jackson County is so incompetent, they can't even make meetings that they set with the two sports teams. They blame it on, sick kids, issues with this, issues with that. It is insane how incompetent they are. If you had one of your biggest meetings, maybe this morning, you're getting ready for one of the biggest meetings of your professional career. Would you cancel it at the very last minute? No, you wouldn't, because that's not what you do. Unless you literally get into some kind of, fender bender car accident 5 minutes before the meeting, you're not canceling it. But it was, 2 Mondays ago that Jackson County canceled a meeting with the two professional sports franchises in this town because they don't have their ish together. And they haven't for a very long time. You have Frank White, who for whatever reason, whether it's personal or professional, doesn't want to work one iota with these two teams and keeping them here. That's become very evident and very obvious. And then you have a county legislature that could theoretically override Frank White to get something on the ballot for the Jackson County taxpayer to vote on come April of 2024, and they're too busy fighting each other. They're too busy angling for their next political gig. Not every single one of them, but many of them. And many of them are eyeballing Frank White's job. They want to be the next county executive. So nobody's working together, and it's all done in the name of politics. So if you're a Jackson County resident, if you're a Jackson County taxpayer, or even if you're not, you can go to this event next Tuesday night with Manny Abarca. It's at Fowling Warehouse, KC. You've got to RSVP. It's right off State Line Road. Essentially, it's right by our buddy Jasper. Just right off there at 103rd Street and State Line Road is where it is. Right next to the Price Chopper up there. It looks like where it is. So if you want to go out there next week, you can be a part of it. I doubt Frank White is going to be there. I mean, him and Manny Abarca do not like each other. That is very evident. But once again, don't discount the politics in all this. The politics are playing a big role in why this thing has been so screwed up. And at this point, if you're the Royals and the Chiefs, you have to create some kind of threat to get these guys moving. You have to do that in any negotiation. You have to put together some kind of threat to say, if you don't start negotiating with us, if we don't start getting the ball rolling here, guess what? We're out. We're done. Sayonara. See you later. And they don't want to, especially the Royals, they don't want to start bringing other towns into it. They don't want to do it. They don't want to start talking about, I guess they can't talk about Vegas anymore. The A's are going there. They don't want to start talking about Austin or Nashville. Although it only took 4 minutes into the show for the text line to start buzzing. This from 9977 saying, Pete, the Nashville Royals sounds good now. No one cares. See, I don't agree with that. I think you would care. I think once they were gone, you would care. And I don't mean you, the texter, but I mean anybody who's kind of having these thoughts of, well, screw them, let them go. The grass is not always greener. Over the last 10 years, some of the greatest moments in this town's history and in our collective memories have been around the sports teams. Chiefs aren't going anywhere. We know that. But even the Royals, go back to 14, go back to 15. The thrill, the enjoyment, the camaraderie, the memories that embraced and engulfed this town. I know for many of you, you still talk about it. It was a couple of years before I got here. But, I mean, I still hear it from many of you every single day when you talk about the memories of that moment. You know, the difference between Kansas City and Omaha, in many ways, is the professional sports. It has allowed this city to continue to boom, to continue to grow, despite the fact that the city and the metro in large part is run by incompetent politicians who can't get out of their own way. The sports teams have brought incredible amounts of free publicity and advertising to the great region that we call home, the Kansas City area. And I don't think we should discount that. I'm not saying Kansas City necessarily is going backwards if they were to lose a professional sports team, but it certainly, I don't believe, would increase at the pace that we're seeing right now. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a taxpayer, you want to get screwed by a billionaire ownership group. But at the same time, what the two teams are asking for, as I understand it, is an extension of the current 3/8 cent sales tax. What's on the books right now. Would you be willing to do that if you're a taxpayer in Jackson County? Once again, it's not a new tax. There are no new taxes here, as I understand what the teams want you to vote on in April of 2024. An extension of the 3/8 cent sales tax. No new taxes. Would you be open to that? Would you vote yes on that? If there were new taxes involved, I think they would go down in flames, a la the use tax that got voted down last month by Jackson County. But if we're talking about an extension of what has already been on the books for several years now, is that enough for you to say, screw it, I want my money back, I don't want to give them 3/8 of a cent anymore? I think that would pass overwhelmingly. And at this point, that's what the teams want on the ballot. And the legislature, for the most part, and Frank White, can't get out of their own way. They should willingly put that on the ballot and then let the voters decide whether or not they want it. But they have until mid-January to get it on the ballot in April, and apparently that's the issue. We've got, 7-8 weeks until this thing has to be on the ballot, and no one's been able to finalize whether or not they can get this thing on the ballot. So that's been the big sticking point right now. 913-408-7957 as we get the show rolling on a Tuesday on KCMO. Now, speaking of, this kind of ties together, sports. The Daily Wire, our friends there, Ben Shapiro's outlet, they have a new movie they've released called Lady Ballers. It's comical and it's horrifying. And I want to play a clip from the movie. 8-year-old daughter tells her dad about how a girl showed her his junk. And it's comedic, but it's also, unfortunately, far too real. I'll get that to you coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM.
Mundo in the Morning is streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Powered by Underlaw Injury Lawyers. GetJim.com.
Hope your Tuesday morning's off to a great start. Mine is because late last night I'm looking around, scrolling through social media, and I saw this last week, but last week was just a little chaotic for me. Had this wedding I was going to. I was kind of all over the place. So I missed a couple of things. And I missed the fact that our friends at the Daily Wire, which is Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh's outlet that they work for. And, of course, you hear those guys both here on KCMO. Shapiro's on at 2 o'clock, and Matt Walsh is now on at 8 p.m. after Mark Levin. Their company, the Daily Wire, has produced a movie called Lady Ballers. Now, what's interesting about Lady Ballers is it's here's the description of the movie. A down-on-his-luck former high school basketball coach will do anything to win, which in this case means leading his team of men to don wigs and brutally dominate in multiple women's sports. Now, it's a comedy. It's this is the kind of stuff that if we had real comedy today in America, people would be doing. But if you do this kind of comedy in America in 2023, you get canceled. Your career is over. So that's why these outlets like Daily Wire, who we're partnered with here on KCMO, are critically important. Because it's making a mockery of one of the most insane things we're living through in today's world. And that is the idea that we should readily accept men competing in women's sports and just kind of going along with it and having a blast. And, hey, don't say anything about the fact that this dude finished 802nd in his men's race as, let's say, a cross-country runner. But now he's a top 5 athlete as a woman. Geez, I can't imagine why that might be. Can you? So anyway, I found a clip from this movie, Lady Ballers. And here's the other funny part of this. Well, you know what? I'll play the clip, and then I'll tell you something else about this movie that's hysterical. And it has to do with who they had to cast in the movie. So here's the clip.
Oh, and Mary Margaret showed me her penis.
Some boy showed you his penis?
What? No, not a boy, Daddy. Gross. Mary Margaret, she's a girl.
Girls don't have penises, Winnie.
Mary Margaret does. Penises are weird.
Can we stop saying penis, please? Where'd this happen, anyway?
In the bathroom.
Well, why are they letting boys in the girls' bathroom?
Why do you keep misgendering Mary Margaret?
Misgendering? What are you talking about?
It's very transphobic of you.
How do you know the word transphobic?
I'm 8 years old.
Exactly, you're 8 years old.
Okay, boomer.
You know what? It's fine. We'll just have to get you into a private school. Some of them have good sports programs.
Private schools reinforce white patriarchal privilege.
Teach you that at public school, did they?
No. Mommy's boyfriend Chris told me. He's an ally.
Is he? We'll see about that.
Lady Ballers. Streaming exclusively on Daily Wire Plus.
I don't know. The two lines that really get me are when the little girl's in the backseat going, okay, boomer, to her dad. And then, who told you that? Oh, mom's boyfriend, Chris. He's an ally. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that it cracks me up for so many reasons because it's bizarro world, but it also is the world that we find ourselves in right now, in real time, living through. And you got to laugh at it because if not, you're going to go insane. I also got a kick out of the, private schools reinforce the white patriarchy. Where'd you learn that? Your government school? You got to be kidding me. So the people that starred, the guy in that clip right there is Jeremy Boring, who is the CEO of Daily Wire. So Matt Walsh put this up on a social media yesterday that they wanted to make this sports comedy for a long time, mocking the insanity of just willingly accepting men playing girls' sports. But they couldn't find enough actors brave enough to star in the film. So what happened? A lot of the Daily Wire folks played the characters themselves. So you've got a lot of the Daily Wire people who are in this movie. Jeremy Boring, who's the lead actor. He's the CEO of Daily Wire. You have a lot of the Daily Wire employees, Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Michael Knowles, Andrew Clavin, who are also in this movie acting. Clay Travis is in the movie. Riley Gaines, who's been in the studio, is in the movie. And it does make me wonder if all these guys and gals can just literally out of nowhere become actors and actresses and do, as far as I can tell in the clips that I've seen, a pretty decent job of it. What does that say about acting in general? Like, I don't know. I've never acted in my life. I do this every day. But in terms of acting in a movie, it's nothing I've ever done. It's nothing I'm really ever interested in doing. But how difficult is it? I mean, once you memorize the lines, how difficult is it when you've got an entire staff of Daily Wire folks who just out of nowhere decided to make a movie they couldn't cast for the movie because anybody in Hollywood knew their careers would be destroyed if they were to appear in this movie with Daily Wire. So the Daily Wire folks picked themselves up by their bootstraps and said, screw it, we're going to do it. It just makes, and I don't know anything about acting, but it makes me wonder if these guys were able to just step up to the plate and get it done, how hard can it be? How difficult is it? I mean, maybe some of you have been to acting classes before. I haven't. I know nothing about it, but I do know this much. If the entire Daily Wire staff can put on a movie and cast themselves in a movie, and it actually turns out to be pretty good, then why do we worship? And I don't mean we meaning you and I, but I mean we as a culture. Why do we worship these people who spend their lives pretending to be something else? Not that I don't love good movies. I do. I appreciate them. I think they're great. But when it comes to the idea of acting and being a truly great actor, I'm not saying there isn't a part of the craft that is very nuanced and is very difficult to do. I'm just wondering, how tough can it really be? So Lady Ballers, at some point I'm going to be watching that on Daily Wire Plus. I don't know if it's this weekend. I don't know if it's next weekend. I don't know if it's during some downtime between the holidays. But we need some comic relief like this. Because right now, comedy in our culture today is just like, what's your latest 7-year-old Donald Trump joke that really isn't all that funny?
He's a cuckoo bird.
That's what comedy has become for the late night folks. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, this, if you are a Kansas Citian, this is something that is being considered at City Council that should have you outraged. I will tell you about it next. Not much surprises me coming out of Kansas City, Missouri City Council these days, but this did. And I want to make sure that we lead the way in this town on this story to try to get this thing killed, because it has no business being law. It has no business being something that Kansas City residents and landlords have to deal with, but it's firmly on the table. And there are going to be a lot of loud, obnoxious voices telling you why this needs to become policy. What am I referring to? What am I talking about? Well, the policy that is under consideration is called, here it is, the Source of Income Ordinance. That's the name of this ordinance that's being considered by the Kansas City, Missouri City Council. And it's not just being considered, like it's got multiple co-sponsors, including the mayor in Kansas City, Quentin Lucas. And here's what it says in the Kansas City Star as I read this for you. Another landlord-tenant battle is brewing in Kansas City over an issue that the landlords won last time around. 4 years later, the KC Tenants, the citywide tenant union, is taking another run with the support of Mayor Lucas at getting an ordinance passed that would prohibit landlords from refusing to rent to people based solely on an applicant's credit history, prior evictions, criminal background, or source of income. This is insane. And you might sit there right now and say, Pete, it's 6:36 in the morning. I'm not a landlord. What do I care? Well, if you're a renter or you're a homeowner, you should care. What if you have a rental property, not owning one, but what if you have one next door to you? What if you have one down the street from you in Kansas City, Missouri? You could have a situation where the landlord of that property is not able to reject a potential tenant based on their criminal background. And I asked yesterday Stacey Johnson Cosby about this. She is the president of the Kansas City Regional Housing Alliance. And I went a little extreme when I asked her this kind of example, but I wanted to be very clear on what the Kansas City, Missouri City Council might end up doing. So here was part of our back and forth yesterday. I mean, the criminal background thing is also crazy to me. I mean, are you saying that you could be forced to basically house a pedophile? Could that be part of this ordinance? Do you know?
Absolutely, because we cannot ask about and we cannot use criminal background against them. An arrest history or a conviction history cannot be used against them. What they're doing is they're expanded the protected classes. So instead of race, religion, family status, they're expanding it to include source of income. People with criminal records, people with low credit scores are now going to be protected by our city of Kansas City, led by the mayor and our city council. And we need to tell them absolutely not.
That is Stacey Johnson Cosby, president of the Kansas City Regional Housing Alliance, yesterday on the show. So think about that. Obviously, you got to have rules. You can't reject somebody because of their religion, because of their skin color, because of their gender, like all that, obviously. You can't have that kind of discrimination. But when it comes to the idea of whether or not you should be allowed or should be required as a landlord to allow somebody with a criminal history into your property, you can't reject them exclusively based on their criminal history. That is patently insane. And even if there are going to be ways around it, right? Even if there's going to be ways to say, hey, this person's got a criminal background. I don't want to take them as a tenant. I got to figure out a different reason for why I don't want to take them. Even if there are ways around it, it sets an awful precedent for where this city is. And it sets an awful precedent for how this city is able to be bullied by a bunch of commies who run around saying, housing for all, we all deserve a house. They want free everything, this KC Tenants group. And they deserve none of it. But they continue to go down to City Hall, make a lot of loud noises, and intimidate members of this city council who want to appear like they are the wokest of the woke. And the KC Tenants group knows that. So they've got their allies on the city council. I didn't think that Quentin Lucas would be somebody who would fall for this. He likes to talk about how he's a moderate. And you know what? This is one of those things where when he comes on the show Thursday morning, God willing, he'll be here. This is going to be a big part of our conversation. Unless all hell breaks loose in this town over the next couple of days with something else I don't see coming. But this is the kind of policy that we are going to lead the way on here on this show in pushing back against and making a lot of noise on. Because here's how this stuff always goes. These activists, and I use my air quotes when I say that, these activists intimidate city council members. They go to the very micro levels. They have a lot of time, too. None of them have real jobs for the most part or have families or whatever. So they just are professional activists. They bully city council into, passing these bad ordinances. And then it makes news by the time it's too late. And that could be in the next couple of weeks if this ordinance passes. And by then it will be too late. So if you are a Kansas City resident, you have got to get on the horn with your city council members. And you have two. You have one at large, or I guess you have multiple at large, and then you have one in district. You have got to start rattling their cages. Because there's going to be a fallout from this. All these people who are like, we're against the BlackRocks of the world owning all the properties. Who's going to be left? What mom and pop realtor is going to want to own a property in Kansas City because they can't reject a pedophile from renting their place? Who in their right mind is going to do that? 913-408-7957. Let's go to Glenn. He's on KCMO. Hey, Glenn, what's happening?
Hey, Pete. Good morning. So, Pete, I was just, I'm on definitely on your side about this, but here's the thing. Whenever you have the mayor on, you seem to get rolled by the mayor because he filibusters and he's always got this, just his political speak about, oh, Pete, well, and hey, and this and that. And, I've never seen you really stand up to the mayor. And I think it's because you always have to have, Pete, I really believe if you really push back and you were pretty tough on the mayor, he wouldn't come on your show. I think it's another reason why you're on PBS on the weekends at times. It's because you yourself are kind of a center moderate Republican. You are kind of a squishy in the middle, kind of a talk show host. So when you get them on, I hope you really do press them, and I really hope that people do wake up and see what's going on, because this could be a disaster for Kansas City, Missouri.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, Glenn. I guess I disagree. I'm not sure what I'm not sure. My job is to welcome somebody on and ask them questions that they don't get anywhere else in town. And then if people don't like it, and oftentimes I don't like the answer, now you know how to feel. I mean, I don't know what more you want me to necessarily do on that front. You ask the question, and here's the thing. You ask the question nobody else is asking.
Hey, yeah, that's fine. Ask the question. It's just sometimes the follow-up questions, or you don't always push back on the answers that you get. Like, for instance, when you asked the mayor what he was doing over in Europe when he was there on the trip just a couple of weeks back, and you asked who was funding it, then, he told you he was funding it, but all week you kind of seemed to make fun of him when after he told you, like, oh, okay, Mayor, well, thanks. And then that was it. That was the end of it.
I'm just curious, Glenn, what's the next question to ask?
Well, again,
No. Tell me, since you can do this well, tell me what the follow-up is once he tells me who's funding it.
You should have said, Mayor, are you really sure that that's who's funding it? Because we don't believe you, Mayor, because that's what you were inferring. But that's what you were inferring all week.
I wasn't. I was. You don't.
Wait a minute, Pete. Come on, Pete. You can't be calling the mayor like he's a liar.
I never called him a liar on that.
No, Pete, you inferred it all week long.
No, I didn't.
But again, that's the squishy part of Pete.
No.
You're like, I can.
Here's Glenn. Glenn, here's the thing. You don't know what you're talking about. The PBS thing.
Pete, I listened to the show.
Glenn, with all due respect, I let you come on here and rail on me for 3 minutes, which is fine. You're allowed to do that. I'll let you do it. But, I mean, you don't know what you're talking about. You realize there are people at PBS who boycott me every time I come on that show? I know it makes you feel good, and I know that, there's always these people out there that are on my Facebook page, but I give Glenn credit. At least he calls up. A lot of people like to Facebook message me some of the stuff Glenn's saying and Twitter message me these things. Enough about me. Can we talk about the policy? Can we talk about what this conversation was supposed to be about, which is about how we protect citizens and landlords in Kansas City? I've got to defend myself here, but I also don't want to get off track. I know some of you guys feel the way you do. Hey, if only you were tough on the mayor. You know what? The guy answers the questions. If you don't like the answers, and a lot of times I don't, that's just how it goes. You got to have respectful conversations. And the fact that I ever insinuated he was a liar based on who funded the trip to Germany, I don't know what that's about. I'm the only one that asked him about it, though. And by the way, the answer was legit. I confirmed it after the fact. It's just a matter of whether or not the Chamber of Commerce should have somebody sponsoring the mayor for going to Germany to try to get business back to Kansas City when you've got Kansas City businesses who are fleeing the city. That's not calling him a liar over it. I mean, there's a little more nuance than I think you're giving the show credit for, Glenn. And if you miss it, I don't know how to help you. 913-408-7957. I'd love to get back to the conversation about how to actually protect Kansas City from this horrible ordinance. And that involves you as a Kansas City resident reaching out to your city council members and making this a point. 913-408-7957 is how you join us on KCMO Talk Radio, now on the FM dial at 95.7. 6:52. Happy Tuesday. Tirade Tuesday is only an hour and a half away. Some of you want to get started early this morning, and that's fine. It is what it is. But, as far as I'm concerned, the things I care about, making sure that things like the source of income ordinance get rejected and don't pass the city council, and the proposal that has enough co-sponsors right now to pass the city council would basically require any landlord to accept a tenant, because you wouldn't be able to reject somebody due to their credit history, their prior evictions, their criminal background, or their source of income. So that's something that is on the table right now. And I've reached out to multiple city council members who have co-sponsored that, and conveniently, they have not gotten back to me yet. But we're going to keep hammering them. And if you're a Kansas City resident, by the way, you have got to be reaching out to your council people as well on this. 913-408-7957 is how you join us. Frank is first up on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Hey, Frank, good morning.
Hey, Pete, I am not calling to really comment on that other than thank you for continuing to keep this stuff in front of us. I'm calling to kind of rebut Glenn. Here's the deal. There's a difference between confrontation and engagement, and I appreciate the fact that you engage the mayor. You let him hang himself out and display his filibustering and whatever Glenn wanted to call it. But, engagement keeps the relationship going so we can hear the continued lack of reasoning on the other side many times.
Well, Frank, you said it in some ways better than I did, and that's exactly the purpose of the conversation in large part. Because for people that are listening closely, they're listening to oftentimes somebody hang themselves. That's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and that's why you're a gem, and we really appreciate you. Although you are still wrong on the fact of wearing no socks and no dress shoes. We will have to discuss it. I did bring you some ankle socks just to try those out for good ones.
Thank you for that, Frank.
Did you try those socks? Did you try those socks, buddy?
Wait, when did you send me socks?
Oh, I brought them over to the studio when you had your rant on about I think it was Bill O'Reilly or somebody. No, it was the noon host was saying.
Wait, how long ago was this? How long ago was this?
Year and a half ago, and the noon host was ranting on about people that wore no socks, and you said he's got to get a life because you couldn't stand socks. And I said, get some decent socks from Duluth Trading Company that are. I bet one of the technicians stole them. That's what happened.
Yeah, well, I never got. No one gave the socks to me, so you didn't give them to me directly.
Oh. No, I didn't. No
one ever gave me a pair. No one ever gave me a pair of socks.
Okay. Another trip to Duluth Trading Company. I'll get you some.
All right, Frank. Thank you very much for that.
Enjoy your day.
Oh gosh. Now I got beef with somebody in the building. Mark's off today. He's had the baby here in the last few days. John's got the day off too. So we got our man Garner on the other side of the glass, handling the calls and pushing all the buttons and keeping us afloat. So I can't rib him about it because he won't know anything about it. But Mark or John, maybe they got the socks. I don't know anything about these socks Frank's talking about. Jim is on KCMO. Jim, what's happening?
Hey, Pete. The slippery slope that they're trying to introduce here, what if they start requiring this for employment?
Yeah.
Because
that's a great point.
Then you can't. Yeah, once they start this, is that wording only for residential?
Well, how about this? What if the city led, and I don't want this to happen, but let's say the city led by example and said, you know what? When we're hiring here at 12th and Oak, we are not going to be able to check on your criminal background.
Exactly.
Or anything like that, your credit history, any prior evictions. We're not going to do any of that when we look into hiring people. What if they're hiring cops and they're hiring cops saying, we're not going to look at your criminal background to be a cop in this town? How stupid would that be?
Exactly, and that's exactly what this is leading to.
That is that is such an excellent point. And that is a point that should be brought up if I can get any of these co-sponsors of this bill on this show outside of the mayor. Which, once again, for all the people, thank you, Jim, for all the people who want to knock him. No one else is even responding to me. I know he's going to be here on Thursday to talk about it at 7:30. I can't say that for these other folks who won't even get back to my calls and my text messages and everything else I've reached out to them about. But you want to talk about slippery slopes? That is spot on being brought up right there by Jim. Excellent point. I'm so glad you did that. Good job there. by Jim on KCMO Talk Radio, 913-408-7957. We're going to keep that conversation going on KCMO. Next hour, Dave Traubert, Kansas Policy Institute at 7:30 on the future of the Chiefs and the Royals. Could they go to Kansas? But next, the fourth debates tomorrow. What are their ratings going to look like? We'll get to it coming up. 7:05, welcome in. Hope your Tuesday morning's off to a great start. So tomorrow night is the fourth GOP debate. Of course, Donald Trump is not going to be there. It's going to be on News Nation as well. Megyn Kelly is going to be one of the moderators. So you remember last time Megyn Kelly was moderating a debate, right? With the Trumpster 7 years ago now. Woo, that thing went off the rails a little bit. But not expecting any of that tomorrow night. Going to be fairly ho-hum. But what I will say is that there is an appetite to hear people exchange ideas. And oftentimes there's an appetite to hear people exchange ideas who are on different sides of the aisle because we don't get that in today's political climate anymore. So before I get to what's coming up tomorrow night, I saw the ratings yesterday for the Gavin Newsom-Ron DeSantis debate that aired with Sean Hannity last Thursday night. And it did 5 million viewers. To put this into perspective, that beat every Trump town hall that he's done this year. Not even close. Trump town halls were doing anywhere from 2.8 to 3.3 million. In July, he did a town hall with Hannity. That brought in 2.9 million viewers. He did a town hall with Hannity in June. That brought in 2.8 million viewers. And he did one on CNN back in May that brought in 3.3 million viewers. And by the way, when it comes to I don't want to get too far in the weeds here on this, but Trump's June event with Sean Hannity brought in 320,000 viewers in the demo. What does that mean? 25 to 54-year-olds. That's how media oftentimes rates itself, 25 to 54. He did 320,000 viewers in the demo. That is half of what the Gavin Newsom-Ron DeSantis debate did last week. So what's your takeaway from that? Well, my takeaway is that people are thirsty for smart individuals to debate and to converse with each other from different sides of not just the political aisle, but different worldviews. And that's what last week was with Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis. These are two guys who are, listen, Newsom's not running for president. I mean, maybe he is if Biden trips over a curb or something. Ron DeSantis is down, minimum 30 points in most polls. So he's unlikely to be the nominee. These are two guys who are governors, but who are not likely to be president. And they did better than every Donald Trump town hall this year. By the way, by a sizable margin, 40, 50, 60%. And they came close to last month's Republican presidential debate, which did about 7.5 million viewers. This debate between Newsom and DeSantis did over 5 million viewers. In many ways, that ties into what I was just talking about, or what some of you wanted to talk about last hour with, Quentin Lucas coming on this show and myself. And if only I yelled at him a little bit louder, he would listen to me or something like that. I'm not really sure what the point was. People are thirsty to hear those who disagree engage because we don't do it anymore. It used to be, remember the days of Hannity and Combs? You used to have, Tucker Carlson used to be on MSNBC at one point with his little bow tie. But now it's just echo chamber after echo chamber after echo chamber. That's all it's become on cable news, and it's really dumb. When's the last time you got smarter watching anything like that? I mean, the 5 is kind of the only thing that I can think of where there's a little bit of pushback. But let's be honest, the 5 is basically a 4-on-1 deal. Not exactly a fair fight. It's not mano a mano. Kind of like Meet the Press on Sundays. It's like there's one kind of somewhat Republican person on there, but once again, it's 3 or 4-on-1 when you include the moderator. Who is it now? It used to be Chuck Todd with his awful bowl cut. I forget who it is now, but you get the point. It's usually 4-on-1 there as well. But I'm talking a true exchange of ideas between two individuals. The numbers were outstanding last week. It exceeded my expectations. You know, I wasn't on the show last Friday because I had the wedding for my sister-in-law last Friday. But Thursday night was the rehearsal dinner, as weddings often have. And I left it early with my two girls because I had to get them to bed. I didn't want them to be a mess on the wedding day, so we left at around 8 o'clock. And, I took them home. I said, don't worry, honey, I got it. I took them home and put them in bed. And then I plopped myself on the couch and I watched some of that debate. Now, when people started getting back to the house, I turned it off because I didn't want to start a war of words the night before a wedding, putting on the Gavin Newsom, Ron DeSantis debate for everybody to waltz in after a few drinks and start yelling at each other over. So I decided I was going to turn it off at that point. But my two big takeaways, just since I haven't talked to you about it yet, number one, Gavin Newsom is incredibly slick. That dude has slickness down to a T. And then Ron DeSantis is an incredible governor. He makes some great points, but he just doesn't know how to communicate them effectively. He makes like 3 outstanding points over the span of, let's say, 15 to 20 seconds, but he doesn't let his points breathe so you can really comprehend what he said. He doesn't just let it sit so you can really understand what he says. He's almost, I don't want to kiss his butt in saying this, but he's almost too smart for his own good. Either that or he's just a really bright guy and a good governor, but a bad communicator. Because I kept yelling at the TV saying, Ron, great point. Now stop talking. Just be quiet. But of course, he didn't hear me through the television, unfortunately. But he's getting, it's a learning process, but he's getting better. Not as fast as he needs to, but he is getting better at this. That being said, tomorrow night, the debate's on News Nation, which is a startup cable news outlet. If you have cable, you probably have it. I have YouTube TV. I have News Nation. It's where Andrew Cuomo is now doing a show. Dan Abrams is doing a show over there. So they've got people like that doing the show over there on News Nation. Megyn Kelly is going to be one of the moderators tomorrow night. What are the ratings going to be? I think they'll be similar to the last one of 7.5 million. Now, the first debate back in August did about 12 million on Fox. So the last debate, the third debate, was down about 40% from the first debate. But I don't think the numbers are going to keep going down. I think that as you get closer to an election year, the numbers are going to start to go up, if not hold steady. So even though Trump's not going to be there, I think you'll probably get somewhere in that 7 million range. And in the end, I wish Trump was there. I think we're getting to the point where he should be there. But for him, he's continuing to not show up with the idea being, I don't need to show up because I'm in the polls. I head in the polls so much. And I'm not saying it's going to backfire on him. There's nothing to suggest that it will right now. But I do wonder if, as we get closer and closer and closer to an election year, if people do start to ask themselves, hey, why does he think that my vote is a lock for him? Is that an arrogance that might turn people off? I'm not saying it will. I just wonder if as we get closer to that point in time, that conversation in people's own minds starts to permeate. 913-408-7957. As we hit 7:14 on a Tuesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio. Of course, set that preset on 95.7 FM. We are almost 2 months into this brand new frequency, and damn, does it feel good. Dave Traubert, bottom of the hour, is going to be here. Talk about whether or not the Chiefs to Kansas, the Royals to Kansas actually makes sense, whether or not that's a good deal for the state of Kansas, because it's getting a lot of attention the last few days. That's going to be a great conversation coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. Who got richer during the pandemic? Like, really richer? Well, the people who already had money, that's who. Yeah, Wall Street Journal dropped this yesterday. It says here, the pandemic made Americans richer across every racial, ethnic, and income group, though not equally. So what they did here is they analyzed the data December 2019 through December of 2021 for the lowest income Americans of every racial background. And before I get to what this shows here, I think it's important to preface this before some of you start saying, see, the pandemic was good. Everyone got richer. Well, people got checks from the government, and now we're paying the price for that. Like literally and figuratively, we're paying the price for that. So before some of you say, look at how good our stimulus policy was. Everyone got richer. Yeah, and now everyone is poorer because they can't afford groceries. Way to go, geniuses. It was like going on a Coke bender. It was great when you were riding high and life was good. Not that I know anything about this, by the way. I don't. I'm just using it as an example from what I hear and from watching movies. Like Wolf of Wall Street. But man, when you come crashing down, that crash is ugly. And that's exactly what we're living through right now. We were on a sugar rush, maybe a more appropriate example to use, and now we're paying the price for that sugar rush. So higher inflation, Wall Street Journal writes, combined with the end of government stimulus checks and a resurgence of consumer spending might have chipped away at Americans' net worth. But after-tax income fell nearly 9% in 2022 after stimulus payments stopped. So once again, after-tax income fell 9% after the stimulus payments stopped. But now for the data. The racial wealth gaps. Asian households held the most wealth overall. Their net worth grew 43% to $320,000 in 2021. White households posted a 23% increase to $250,000. Hispanic households had a net worth of $49,000, and black households held the net worth of $27,000 by the end of 2021. Wealth gaps were widest amongst lower-income households, who are less likely to own homes and have assets in retirement accounts. Low-income white households had 21 times the wealth of low-income black households. Among middle and upper-income families, the ratio is 3-to-1. The least wealthy black households cut their debt from a median of $10,000 to $4,000 by the end of 2021. The median net worth for low-income Hispanic households rose to zero from $1,000 in debt. And the least wealthy white and Asian households ended the pandemic with net assets of $4,700 for whites and $8,900 for Asians, respectively, according to the report. What's the takeaway here? The takeaway is that the pandemic policies, which, we've talked about for the better part of 3.5 years now, worked out very well for those with money. Their stocks went to the moon. The value of their home prices skyrocketed. They did very well. The laptop class was loving life. But it was awful economic policy because those at the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, they did a little better, but not nearly as better as what those on the higher end did. And that's typically true for any time government gets involved in something. Anytime you get government spending, what typically happens? It's always pitched as helping the little guy. But when you actually go back and look at the data, it rarely does. Whether it was the stimuluses, the PPP monies, all these things that we spent money on in the name of protecting people from COVID, ended up making people who already had businesses and had wealth even more wealthy. And I'm not against, by the way, rich people getting richer. I'm only against it if it's done artificially, not through the free market, and done because the government is getting involved in public policy. And that's exactly what ended up happening in this case. And that's why I'm dead set against it. And we now have 3.5 years of data that we're starting to look back on and saying, wow, this was really stupid. This did not work out like we were promised. And by the way, that is the fault of both political parties, Republicans and Democrats. Let's not forget, Donald Trump was in the White House handing out stimulus checks like they were candy. The stimmies, as the kids called them back in the day, right? And don't forget, Trump did one final stimmy after he lost the election. Why? I don't know. It was really stupid, but he did it. Now, Joe made it infinitely worse when he got to office. He kept the gravy train going, and now we're really paying the price, 2.5, 3 years later. But you look back on this, and you got to look at both parties and say, what were we thinking? And let's make sure we never do this again. Now, here's what the Wall Street Journal article also notes here. People who have been able to sustain the wealth they gained during the pandemic either already had good financial habits before it started or developed those habits during the pandemic. Here's a story for you. When the pandemic hit, Duncan Moore, 27 years old, was making $18 an hour as a restaurant manager. The restaurant closed, and Moore, who lives in Denver, started getting $1,700 stimulus checks every 2 weeks. He said it was a pretty significant jump in his income. He paid off debt, got a laptop fixed, started an emergency fund. He then bought 2 homes with his business partner, which they flipped and resold together. They have since bought more homes and plan to rent them out. So for all of you right now who are in the market for a house, how many Duncan Moores out there have driven up the cost of housing so now you can't get a home for your family? The government did this. Like, I'm happy for this kid, Duncan Moore. He was making $18 an hour as a restaurant manager, and then he started getting checks from the government, and now he's flipping rental homes left and right. Like, I guess I'm happy for him. But how many thousands, if not millions of people like that are there around the country who have artificially inflated the cost of housing, and the government encouraged it? The government promoted it. The government drove it. Let's not forget that. Coming up, if you are a veteran, this conversation is going to be for you when it comes to whether or not illegal immigrants should be allowed to serve in the military. We'll get to it next.